okay, Khadija?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay now.
Perfect. So I think we are ready to go. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's definitely my pleasure to be with you today. I am Khadija Idrissi Janati. I'm entrepreneur, founding president of eAfrica and eFront Forum. These are platforms that promote intra-Africa trade and investments, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar under the thematic Trade and Investment in Africa. Can the EU keep the competition at bay? Well, this webinar is the fifth and last from a series of virtual events and panel discussions taking place, I think, between September and October. So we'll have in the last one and leading up to the next EU summit in 2021. This is co-organized by ADEPT, a service delivery platform working with African diaspora development organizations in Europe that are active in the development of Africa, and MERIDIA Partners, a public affairs and strategic communications agency specializing in EU-Africa relations. Well, thank you everyone for joining. The trade doctrine of the African countries gathered in the EU seems to take some liberties, and the choice revealed by the free trade agreements adopted in Niamey in late July is clearly an offensive step. Regional free trade agreements signed with the EU, mainly EPAs, are today seen as kind of imposed rather than chosen. So the imperative for the EU was to affirm the choice of the continent to have this free trade as the first legitimate one, even if the terms of these African trade agreements are not completely defined at this side. In short, the political value of a trade agreement, the new political value, would not lie so much in the number of liberalized tariff lines as in the choice of partner of countries. Here, the choice is clear. Africa would like to develop its exchange with African countries. But this being said, Africa is, and for a long time, has been a strategically important partner for the EU. And this has steadily increased over the recent years, many causes, let's say for that, many reasons. Starting by the investment opportunities, going through the migration issues, but also because the development of the African countries is showing a large potential. We have also a lot of interest shown by competitors from emerging markets, China, Russia, Brazil, Turkey, and other countries. But we should not forget that EU countries heavily rely on African countries for raw material, energy, and agriculture products, which means that the relation has to continue being there, but it maybe has to be redefined in a way. This is the discussion we would like to have today. I am pleased to welcome my panelists, starting by Hannah Ryder. So you are the founder and CEO of Development Reimagined. You are a former diplomat and economist by training. And when you developed Development Reimagined, you thought of it as the first ever Kenyan wholly foreign-owned enterprise in China. So thank you for joining today's session, and thank you for all the added value you would like to add to the debate. I welcome Barish Kolvachi. You are African Regional Director at Foreign Economic Relations Board of Turkey for 5 years now. You have more than 13 years of experience in business diplomacy, and you own an MBA degree in international trade. Thank you for joining. I am pleased also to welcome Fabrice Nzebe-Kale, General Manager of Afrique Group and Administrator and Investment Banker with a proven track record and experience in banking, investments, mining, and metal sectors. Thank you, Fabrice, for joining.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, Henri de Villeneuve, CEO of Cobasa and MEDEF International Representative for Southern Africa. Thank you, Henri, for joining us.
Thanks for your invitation.
Well, I would like to start by one question, which is, is 2020 a good time to reassess Africa's global partnership? With all that is happening this year and that we are going through, African countries, the world in general, do you think that's the ideal time to reconsider different global partnerships, among which the EU-Africa one? Maybe I hand it to you, Fabrice, to give us your point of view.
Thank you, Khadija. I think the whole world has been impacted negatively by the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's going to be a before and after. Is going to we will need to redefine very clearly what we want to achieve as Africans in the continent. The pandemic has revealed a lot of weaknesses that we probably knew about before, but it has strengthened the need to fix many things. The first one is the healthcare system. Everybody knew that the healthcare system in Africa was deficient, was not enough. With the pandemic, even though so far Africa has fared better than the other continents, it has clearly shown that we need to improve significantly the manufacturing of health devices. We still import masks, we still import ventilators, and this is definitely something that is not sustainable and that we need to change. And I think 2020 and what happens after is clearly the right time for Africa and Africans to redefine what they want to achieve with the AFCFTA and with the European Union.
Well, thank you, Fabrice. Maybe Anna, do you think that's the best time to re-challenge the Africa global partnerships, to rethink them, maybe to re-engineer them?
Well, I fully agree with Fabrice that this is a really great and important opportunity to take advantage of. COVID-19 has not just exposed the vulnerabilities in our system and in the relationships between African countries themselves, but also with other partners, but it's also exposed some important opportunities. Thankfully, the African continent is trying to move ahead with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, as Fabrice mentioned. That is very important for the continent and important to show this collective, it provides a real opportunity for a collective effort going forward. But I think for the EU, frankly, EU Africa trade and investment is definitely very important to African countries, but there are other partners who are very close behind and who have been very close to African countries over the last few months. And so if the EU is going to think about how do we function going forward, how do we work with other partners, this is the time to really do that and to really think about how to do that. And of course, we can discuss. I'll be sharing some ideas for how to do that over the seminar.
Well, thank you, Anna. I will turn to Henri and ask you, Henri, can the EU remain Africa's main investor and trading partner in a post-COVID area where everything is being re-challenged? Est-ce que vous pensez que l'Union européenne peut peut maintenir sa place de partenaire et surtout d'investisseur en Afrique, investisseur de choix, post-Covid? Le monde est en train de changer, l'Afrique est en train de reconsidérer un changement de paradigme dans les partenariats. Pensez-vous que l'Union africaine est en position de le faire? Si oui, pourquoi? Quels sont les atouts qui feraient que l'Union européenne resterait le partenaire de choix?
Pour revenir à la position de l'Union européenne vis-à-vis de l'Afrique avant la crise, c'est le paradoxe, c'est l'importance des flux en provenance d'Europe sur l'Afrique qui sont le premier pourvoyeur de fonds, et son manque total de visibilité en tant qu'institution, et son absence de différenciation par rapport à ses grands partenaires ou ses grands concurrents, Chine, France, Turquie, États-Unis, qu'on aime ou qu'on n'aime pas. Donc il y a un manque total de perception de ce que c'est que la politique Union européenne vis-à-vis de l'Afrique, vue du terrain. Je m'explique, vue du terrain. Ça, c'est pour le passé. Donc, si on veut réexaminer, il faut partir de cette image-là, qui est une absence d'image et une absence de l'importance de ce que représente l'Union européenne. La deuxième, post-Covid, vous avez intitulé votre conférence « Trade and Investment ». Je pense que c'est absolument nécessaire parce que le Covid a fait apparaître, au fond, des situations bonnes ou mauvaises qui existaient avant le Covid. Ça a été un révélateur. Et on s'aperçoit, vu de mon côté, vu du terrain, qu'on va être beaucoup plus fixé ou focalisé sur la notion d'investissement et de trade. Ou pour être un peu précis, le trade va être de plus en plus intra-africain. Par contre, le flux d'investissement va rester de plus en plus important entre l'extérieur et l'Afrique. Est-ce que l'Afrique, le mot d'ordre, moi, que je vois vu du terrain, je suis basé en Afrique du Sud, le mot d'ordre numéro 1 prioritaire de l'Afrique, c'est le Foreign Direct Investment. Donc, autour d'abord d'une réaffirmation ou de l'image de l'Union européenne qui est absolument embrouillée en Afrique, plus un reformatage de son action autour de l'investissement par rapport au trade, je pense qu'évidemment, compte tenu de sa puissance de feu et de l'action objective qu'elle a menée, il y a un champ de travail formidable.
Merci, Henri. Well, building on what Henri just said, trade might develop as an intra-Africa.
I can do it in English for everybody. Okay, just
okay, that's perfect.
And Ryder, okay, because
that's perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Just to say that pre-COVID, okay, the image of European Union in Africa was not very clear, and there is no differentiation between European and its big competitors: China, Turkey, United States, Brazil, South Africa, and so on. In Africa, you know what is the policy of China, you know what is the policy of now for new competitors like Turkey, United States, Brazil, South Africa, and so on. From a perspective from the ground, Union European, it's Mr. Nobody, okay? And it's quite difficult to understand that view that the flow of investment, the biggest flow of investments in Africa is coming from Europe. It's pre-COVID. Post-COVID, it's absolutely compulsory to reassess the policy of Union European. This conference, the two words are trade and investments. I believe that trade will be more and more related to the intra-African business, and investments will be the key element of the future relation between Europe and Africa. When you go in Africa, when you travel in Africa, in many countries, you have just one subject, not two, not three, not four. FDI, foreign direct investments. Imports, exports, that will come afterwards. We have no money to buy your stuff. Now we have to invest. Okay, just to be sure, for me, trade doesn't disappear, but investments will be key. And Europe has to focus on investments.
Well, thank you, Henri, and this is clear. So you clearly think that trade will be grown as intra-Africa cooperation, but investment, from your point of view, will remain something that coming from outside Africa. We know that the European External Investments Plan, adopted in 2017, this is a major starting point of this shift that you're talking about, Henri, and this concentrates mainly on mobilizing public and private investments of up to 44 billion euros in Africa and neighborhood countries. Here, I would like to ask you, Barish, how can Turkey position itself within this context? How, as a country, Turkey can kind of compete with the EU in finding a good place for investment and trade within the African countries?
Thank you. First of all, we are here because Africa is essential to our progress. And Africa Rise is not just important to Africa, it's important to the entire world. Turkey is a strategic partner, international promoter, and a supporter of integration of Africa. And in this regard, Turkey also partner with third countries, most European countries, to unlock more value in Africa. So we don't see as a competitors the European countries. We will develop joint projects in trade, capacity building, health infrastructure, energy, and connectivity in Africa. The Europe is important trade and economic partner of Turkey with a long-standing relationship. And then Europe is hosting more than 5 million Turkish diaspora and maybe 70 million African diaspora. We see this as an opportunity to unite of efforts to strengthen integration of Africa. Of course, regarding African continental trade trade area, of course, it's going to increase the inter-trade, and but the countries who will support industrialization and the manufacturing in the continent will definitely benefit more. And so we are open to cooperate with the other countries as well on that. And despite of all the negativities of this pandemic, the Turkish companies hasn't stopped their investments. We are expecting investments in iron and steel and textile sectors in the beginning of 2021. And the Turkish companies hasn't stopped infrastructure projects was going on before the COVID. They will be completing next year as well. So, I mean, the business there, we are there, and we're going to be continue to be there.
Well, thank you, Barish. Maybe it is not always easy for a country to come after in a situation that is which is not totally let's say positive and get involved in a country or in a continent, especially when there are other major players who have been there occupying the space. So I think that Turkey has a vision. My question is, what is the vision of Turkey in Africa? Does Turkey see Africa as rather a partner, or are we in a logic where we need raw material, so we will try to trade for raw material? What's really the vision? If we go beyond today and we see in 10 years, how does Turkey see the future relation and how the partnership can be in maybe 10 years from now?
Turkey sees Turkey's approach to Africa is mutual benefit. We would like to work together on sustainable development, and we are not just there for exporting our products, and we would like to try to contribute development of the building capacity and vocational training and providing employment. And I think that's why it's important that the African countries would like to work with Turkey, as well as the other countries, they would like to partner with Turkey. For instance, Japan and South Korea and even Canada, they would like to co-develop projects in Africa. Our target is to increase the trade volume. $50 billion, as it is now, is 26 billion in few years, and we would like to increase our investments in Africa. And we are planning to open logistics centers to support this free trade area. We very much believe in the Africa that after post-COVID, it's going to be growing. And we would like to be supporting that growth. Regarding the European countries, until 2001, I think the most of the European countries ranked at top 5 in the total imports of Africa. But from 2001 to 2018, their share in imports of Africa decreased, and then China increasing its share and reaching even higher share than trade made by African countries from each other. Considering the rise in protectionist practices and tariff barriers in the global economy, the AFCFTA create a negative impact, of course, on commercial activities of other countries in a medium and long term. This promotes this agreement and to Turkish companies and make them to think about their strategies after the AFCFTA. We made an analysis using SMART, that's partial equilibrium modeling tool that's also used by World Bank. It shows that the intertrade will be increased 7.3%. It means trade volume going to be $5.4 billion, according to the 2018 figures. On the other hand, the additional investment these countries also emerge as a positive effects of this agreement. When the exports of countries other than African countries, when we analyze on country basis, it's expected to be biggest loss on the value basis will be experienced by China, which is the biggest importer of Africa. And according to the Chinese export are projected to decline about $160 million. And following China, the exports of India, France, United Arab Emirates also predict to be decline about $60 million, while Belgium's and Turkey his loss is going to be around $50 million. But by implementing the AFCFTA, the highest increase in anchor trade Africa are expected to be in the main sectors, and that those sectors are Turkish companies are strong in: energy, automotive, fish products, mining products, iron and steel sector. So we are expressing these sectors, and we are always ready to share our know-how. I think that's the main point.
Well, thank you very much, Barish, for this element. So naturally, I would like to turn to Hannah. And what about China? How can China maintain its position within the continent? Maybe take it or upgrade it from a qualitative point of view, but also how can it be present in other regions of the continent in let's say in a fair way? The upcoming question will be about the fairness of these trade agreements, but let's start by talking about China, its positioning within the continent. What, in your opinion, how this will change as post-COVID?
Sure. So again, let me give you a little bit of context for the comparison between the European Union and China. So on trade and investment in particular. So for example, for imports of African goods into the G20, okay, so the 20 most powerful countries in the world, China accounts for 22% of the G20 imports from Africa. And the EU as a whole accounts for 33%. So China is the biggest EU is the biggest partner overall, but if you look at it on a country by country basis, then China is obviously ahead. At the same time, when you look at the proportion of imports from Africa domestically, the EU is ahead of China. So for example, Africa makes up 7% of European Union imports, whereas for China, it's around 4% of Chinese imports. So from the rest of the world, Africa makes up 7% for the EU and 4% for China. And then similarly for foreign direct investment, now China's foreign direct investment stock is fairly low. It only accounts for 5% of all foreign direct investment into Africa at the moment. At the same time, it is growing faster than for the European Union. So for example, between 2016 and 2018, China's foreign direct investment to Africa was 12% higher than the combined figure for the EU. So you can see that it's very possible that China can quickly overtake the European Union in terms of importance in these sorts of metrics, trade, investment. It can quickly do that. Does it matter? Well, what matters is about the quality of the relationship. For example, from an African perspective, is the trade with these powers, with the European Union, with China, is it balanced towards, and other countries, is it balanced towards the African side? Is the quality of the trade, is the foreign direct investment and the trade towards raw materials, or is it extractive, or is it actually into added value manufacturing, which will create more jobs, which will provide much more of a sustainable development? Is it into green investment rather than dirty coal and other types of brown investment, as it were? So these are the sorts of questions about the quality of the investment, the quality of the trade. At this point in time, my firm, we analyze these things constantly. We analyze these questions constantly. Our view is that China is not a particularly bad partner in comparison to European Union partners, but in the same way, European Union partners are not particularly good in comparison to China. All need to improve their relationships. Africa needs to leverage way more out of its relationship with the European Union, also needs to leverage a lot more from the relationship with China. So that's our perspective, that's our view from the analysis. And so I think when we're talking about what can the European Union strategy be towards Africa with regards to trade and investment, it really needs to focus on this question of quality, improvement of the quality of that relationship and the quality of the trade and investment.
Well, thank you, Hannah. That brings me perfectly to the following question. And I will ask you, Henri, building on what Hannah just said about the qualitative parts of any partnership. We all remember the generalized scheme of preferences, le schéma de préférence généralisé. Do you think that this GSP has delivered on its promise to increase trade between Africa and Europe? Do you think that the exports, imports were in a way balanced? Did this ever contribute to encouraging African exports toward the EU?
For sure. But if you want to export, you have to produce. If you want to produce, you need to be invested. Okay. You cannot export what you cannot produce. Okay. Which means in any African market, they know that it's much more easier to export towards Europe than to any country. That works very well. Okay. You have markets, you have money, you have consumers. It's working very well. But for sure, you need to produce. Returning to what has been said about China, okay, it's quite interesting. I believe there is pro and cons. For if you see the strategy what Europe could have or EU could have in Africa. First one, it's we have to bear in mind that China, they invest, they trade, they are for a long term. If you see the story of Singapore, of Malaysia, they have settled many people in these countries years, dozen years, 100 years ago, and they are still there. Don't believe that they are here just for a shot and they will be back home shortly. The good thing for Europe, it's the presence of China is not quite spread in Africa. They are concentrated in some countries, usually like Ethiopia, like Zimbabwe, some country like that. That means there is some space. The difference between EU and China, I want to analyze this point. It's, you see, when you walk in Africa, you travel in this country, you see operation made by China, operated by China, and all with success, a lot of times in joint ventures with local partners. Where do you say ground operation managed and operated by EU? EU is just a funder. They bring money. Okay, that's it. Okay, and China is bringing it's quite impressive when you see how they move. They work as a team, like a bunch. Money, banks, operation, government. They have a strategy. Okay, that means, and that works. When they decided to target a country, any kind of target, okay, they are much more efficient. But we have space. But we have to not to make a copy of China, but we have to be much more well organized as we are, and view from the ground, okay, not to limit the action of EU just to, let's say, money provider.
Well, thank you, Henri. Although you focused more on the investment part, not really on the balance of exports, but I got your point. So you're mainly saying that you definitely need investment to be able to produce what you will go into exports.
Sorry, I just gave you an example. I'm based in Johannesburg. I'm not driving. I try to manage some French delegation, business delegation in these countries, and there is always a mismatch. It's in the delegation, we have a lot of exporters. They are looking for markets, clients, so on. On the other side, on the African side, they are looking for investors. Okay, and I see it during the meetings we had between the government bodies and the delegations. They don't understand each other. They're expecting nothing, the same thing from each other.
Yes, very clear, and thank you for bringing that to the table, because I think there is an issue about symmetry in the agreements. The economic partnership agreements, the EPAs with the EU, have been, especially for the last time, been defined or described as asymmetrical. So, two questions here. Do you think, Henri, that they are really asymmetrical? And then I will hand it to Fabrice, maybe to comment this and to tell us how should this AFTA be finalized, defined, in order to ensure the fairness of the continent-to-continent trade agreements and avoid it to be seen later on as not as beneficial to some countries compared to others. So Henri, if you can just comment this symmetry point before handing it to Fabrice.
Just clarify, what do you mean by symmetry point?
I mean, symmetry is kind of balanced. I mean, that the two parts are gaining as much as one another.
We have nothing special. Okay. No.
Henri, what you're saying is, it may be seen kind of, because do you think that's what Europe is investing in Africa, is bringing to Africa as much as it is bringing to Europe? I mean, are the agreements in general seen as being, balanced between the two parts?
If you say it means, I think that maybe I'm not sure I'm going to reply to your questions. Okay, is to see that money is not a problem. If you want to, there is enough money. Money is the most available commodity in the world right now. Okay, that means the difference between your partners, okay, it's where you drive this money. How do you transfer this money in business on the ground to provide jobs, development, way of living for the people, and so on and so on. Okay, and maybe what we see actually, it's we have more and more people able to providing money, but the challenge, the competition is not there.
Okay, thank you, Henri, for your answer. Fabrice, we would like to hear you on this. How could we ensure the fairness of the continent-to-continent trade agreements and avoid it to be seen as asymmetrical?
I think, just to follow up on what Hannah and Ri have said, I think it's about the quality of the trade and investment relationships. You can have huge imports or huge exports from Africa to the EU or to China, but if in 20 or 30 years down the line, it's still about mostly raw materials, I will not see the benefit of any new partnership. I think what we need, if we want to tackle the unemployment in Africa, is to provide jobs by some kind of industrialization process. So we need to attract more
added value and transformation.
Absolutely.
Added value and transformation.
Absolutely. And I'm not an economist. I'm not a specialist of the EU-Africa relationships, but from my vantage point, what I see is that it seems to me that the partnership agreements that have been signed between the EU and Africa in the past are mostly focused on trade and not enough about investment. And I think what Henry said about trade delegations, French trade delegations to South Africa, who seem to focus more on trades while the South Africans are expecting more investments, speaks volumes about the disconnect between the EU's expectations and Africa's expectations. So it should evolve more towards investments in manufacturing projects in Africa. The second point, to come back to how to do that, is my concern is that today it's more about Africa as a whole, while there are so many differences between the regions. If you take the Central African region today, which is lagging behind mostly all the other regions in the continent, the issues of the Central African region are completely different from the challenges and the objectives of East Africa or Southern Africa or even West Africa. And I think the partnership agreements shouldn't be negotiated at the African level only, because the issues of the continent are not necessarily the issues of the regions. We should follow a bottom-up approach where each region shares their objectives and what they want to achieve.
Well, thank you.
I fully agree with Fabrice said.
Well, thank you, Fabrice. Thank you, Henri, for the comments. I would like to have your perspective, Anna, on how can we ensure that African countries will gain from a more diverse investor base and an enlarged partnership agreements? What are the types of let's say, guarantees that every trade agreement has to contain in order to guarantee that all African countries will be really gaining not only on the short term, but also on a mid and long term, just like what Fabrice was pointing. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think part of the challenge with trade agreements is quite often they are an agreement.
And of course, you can go directly, you can look at the trade agreement itself in terms of the quality, but on the other hand, there are also other issues. So for example, when it comes to the EU, of course, there are a whole range of domestic policy challenges in the EU, which impact on the quality of trade with Africa, in particular, the common agricultural policy, of course, and the common fisheries policies. Those are two simple examples, but when those types of subsidy policies exist, then it makes it very difficult to expand quantity, for example, of trade. first we have to not look at the trade agreement on its own. We have to look at the overall policy, what people call the policy coherence of the agreement. Second of all, we have to think about the quality, the perspective that the trade agreement is coming from. So while I do agree with Fabrice that we need to be thinking about the different parts of Africa differently, the different countries, different regions and countries differently, there are some, and especially with the new Common Free Trade Agreement, AFCFTA, there are some aspects which can be harmonized, and since the region is moving towards harmonization, for example, on rules of origin and a whole range of different non-tariff barriers, those sorts of issues within the agreements need to be made as open as possible. Rules of origin needs to be as lax, non-tariff barriers as lax as possible. Those sorts of things really need to be examined, because those are fundamentally the things which get in the way once you come to actual implementation. Dealing with tariffs is just one small step of a trade relationship. So those sorts of things we need to be, for the EU, needs to be thinking about how continental friendly are those types of the agreements within themselves, and also how open are they, full stop. And then finally, I think there's a question around the overall outlook from the European Union. What is it really trying to do? And again, this goes back to the point with that Henry and Fabrice pointed to, of this kind of view of Africa as almost, well, there's, and I think someone mentioned it also in the Q&A, there is a lot of risk aversity when it comes to Africa, a lack of recognition of the value. And then also that also means that investment can be very skewed. I mean, majority of European Union, also Chinese investment goes into South Africa, for instance. If you have any recognition of intellectual property, the only African country, for example, to have its geographical indications protected in the whole of the EU, the entire of the EU, is South Africa. And all of the goods that are protected are wines, all apart from 3. There's 87, but just 3 are just wine. But there's so many other amazing products that come from Africa that could be protected in the EU, but they're not. So these aspects of really having an outlook with regards to Africa, which is also a positive one, an engaged one, low risk averse, is very, very important. So I would say those 3 elements: the domestic policy, the actual openness of the trade agreement, when you go into the details, need to be really open, and then third of all, this outlook needs to be overarching, positive impact.
Well, thank you, Anna. And this is clear. So you have 3 major, let's say, 3 major opportunities, I would like to say, that have definitely to be taken into consideration. Barish, what is actually how does Turkey today see the EU-Africa partnership? With all the initiatives that have been launched by the EU over the last years, you had the main leader, the European Fund for Sustainable Development, the Alliance for Sustainable Investments and Jobs. Does Turkey see that all these initiatives have delivered any results at this stage? And how can Turkey learn maybe from this experience in order to build a different relationship with Africa?
First of all, let's start with the AFCFTA. The COVID-19 crisis proved that the necessity and promise of the free trade area. And now Africa has the new focus on productive self-sufficiency. And implementing the free trade area will significantly assist to create more resilient healthcare systems, to manufacture of more of the critical needs at home, and support the development of value chains. And as you know, that by 2030, the continent is expected to reach 1.7 billion population, and they are expected to spend, I think, about $6.7 trillion. So to be able to manufacture the needs of African consumers, it's important to continue reforming the business environment and build up the key infrastructure and then support the development of private enterprises. So these European alliances and funding supporting these three main points, and Turkey very much involved in this process. We also give importance to the sharing know-how with African countries. We don't just do the projects and leave it there. We just also operate and teach how to operate, and so they can do their own. I think this is the other important part of investments and development projects. That shouldn't be only PPP. They should be BOT projects to helping countries for sustainable development.
Well, thank you, Barish. I would like also to have Fabrice's points on the same question. Fabrice, do you think that all the initiatives that were launched by the EU have delivered results at this stage? Do you think that the added value after all these years is visible on the African economies?
The short answer is no. Now, who's to blame? I think the blame should be shared mutually by the EU and the Africans. The EU probably for a less than optimal design, which probably favored their interest, and the Africans because, like Hannah said probably before, Africa probably did not leverage enough its relationship with the EU and how it could benefit from partnership agreements with the European Union.
Well, thank you, Fabrice, for a clear question. And that takes me back to Henri. We have a question from the audience, and which is also a question that can naturally come after what we have just heard. How, Henri, can we motivate many more EU industrials to invest in Africa? Because today we mainly see EU exporters. How can we mobilize more investors to come to Africa and invest in the industry and talk about what we have been mentioning as the transformation, as the adding value industries?
Oh. Can you motivate people who are scared? Okay, that means when you are frightened, okay, who can motivate you? Okay, the only day you can motivate when you see that the place has been taken by the other one. You have just your tears to cry, okay? Which means, I believe maybe one of the solutions, okay, for me, my experience of investment in Africa. More you are stick to the ground, more you can deliver. More we can have a management from the EU on the ground and not only from Brussels or Luxembourg will be much more better. It's a big challenge. When you see companies who are investing in Africa, for sure, the guys who are doing investments, they are on the ground. They know the place, and it means the difference between the good investors and the bad investors, it's the good one has information you don't find on internet or on the World Bank survey, okay? My advice, which is an advice of a non-expert in international organization, would be much for European to deconcentrate to their operation, okay, and to as much as they can, okay, to leave their guys on the ground to take decisions, okay, and the investors, okay, could cooperate much more better, okay. I believe it's one of the way. It's definitively a crazy story because you have so much money spent by by you, European Union. Where is going this money? State, banks, okay. The only arm leg of EU to provide money to the private sector is EIB. But the same story. Have you experienced to deal with EIB to make a deal? 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. Okay, investor is fed up. Okay, and it's much more interesting to work with local partners. Okay, than this kind of organization. That means the EU. All these organizations in Europe at the European levels, they have to change their mindset, okay, in terms of way of working, of investing. If they stay sticky in Brussels or Luxembourg and they try to decide everything from Europe, it's done, it's dead.
Well, thank you very much, Henri, for this last
sorry,
answer. I know you have to leave. Okay? Yes, I know that you have.
A bit rough, but my age allow me to be. Goodbye to everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Henri. Thank you for participation. And your last answer actually brings me to ask the same question. So you said mainly that Henri said that EU doesn't really know African countries on the ground. They need to be present on the ground to see how it works and to know how to make it work even better. I thank you, Henri. Thank you. So I would ask kindly the same question, maybe to you, Anna. Do you think that African countries know each other enough to be able to build a real strategic partnership that would add value to all of them? There are many organizations, CEDEAO and others, and wherever there is a trial to open one of these organizations to one additional African country, you have all the others talking on a very small scale compared to the African trade agreements. So that's a much more smaller scale, and you have resilience from some existing members to enter a new country because of sometimes things seen as conflicts of interest. So do you think that African countries know enough each other to be able to build a good partnership? And if the answer is no, do you think that we should have had a first step? How can be this first step we need to start with before the complete operations of these free trade agreements?
Yeah, obviously in terms of regional politics are always very challenging, that's for sure. And even in the region that I'm from, East Africa, I'm from Kenya, we have a lot of challenges at the moment across the border with Uganda and also Tanzania, and things change constantly. But at the same time, and I think COVID-19 is proving this, first of all, there is a big drive towards working together more clearly and building the African Union as an organization that will really support African integration and African prosperity as a whole. And in that sense, we've seen, for example, with COVID-19, we've seen the Africa CDC really make such a difference to the continental response. And it's that absolute, which really, for me, definitely gives me a great deal of hope in terms of the future, that is that shows the ability of African countries to work together for the common good and for the common purpose. I also think that as the benefits of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement get to be shown, there will be shifts. Now we have some partners, for example, some countries such as Nigeria, who are still on the fence. Took a while for South Africa to join, and so on. But my analysis is that they will slowly be persuaded as they understand as there's a potential for a vision for what that cross-border trade can look like. But I think this is where other partnerships can come in, because it doesn't need to be a zero-sum game. And I think this is a real concern between African countries, that there's some kind of, and as you mentioned, conflict of interest, a zero-sum game. If, for example, the EU is there, China is there saying, look, we're not just going to be there to help you integrate. We're also, and trying to just, encourage you guys to trade together. No, we are going to provide a market for you to be selling your goods. And we're going to invest in that too. For example, for the added value, which will use products, added value in Nigeria using products from Ghana, from Cote d'Ivoire, that is something which actually is a real interest, and can, so I think partners can be of help here, and can be of support to a Pan-African vision. Whether they will or not is another question, because of course, we're seeing so much, this is an opportunity, but we're seeing so many countries really turning internally, especially outside of Africa, going very internal. But the movement towards working together is definitely happening in Africa.
Khadija, if I may, just to follow up on what Hannah said, I think there is some progress, but personally, I'm very frustrated by by how slow that progress is. A couple of years ago, there was much of hooray about the AU passport. I've never seen anybody travel with an AU passport. It's been limited to diplomats, AU officials, people like me, businessmen. We still have to apply for visas every time we want to travel within Africa. And I believe that we are the ones who are going to bring economic progress to the continent, not the AU commissioners or the African diplomats. So it's very painful to see that we know exactly what we need to do, even by making baby steps. Okay, within 5 years, the progress will be significant. Nonetheless, we don't walk the talk, and our leaders don't seem to be willing to implement and to make the necessary reforms so that the progress benefits the population.
Well, thank you, Fabrice, for this. So clearly what you're saying is that it's not a matter of knowledge to know what to do or how to do it, or a matter of competencies. It's a matter of political will that is not shown till now, and where action is not taken. I mean, it's very hard to kind of believe that in 54 countries, all the 54 do not have this political will, where when they gather in institutions, just like the EU or other institutions, everybody is speaking about the necessity, showing awareness about the necessity of African countries to come together and to create this huge force when it comes to economy. So this duality between the what they say and what they do, how do you think that this is something that can live even after the COVID-19 crisis? Do you think that this kind of posture has to change after the COVID-19? What's the opportunity, if I can say, from a political point of view of this COVID-19 to change the positions and the acts of our policymakers and country leaders in the African countries?
Are you asking me, or are you asking anybody else?
Fabrice, I'm asking you, since you're the one who talked about this absence of political will, and then I might hand it to somebody else from the panelists if they want to add something to that.
Well, like I said at the beginning, I think the COVID-19 pandemic creates, this is a seismic event that creates the opportunity to change mindsets. I don't think that people are going to just wait for the pandemic to subside and then go back to their lives as it was before. I think people are going to be more demanding going forward in terms of social services delivery, in terms of basic things like getting masks. Why do we have to import masks from China? Even though Africa was not the only continent in that situation, I think Europe or even the US imported basic health equipment from China during the pandemic. But I think this is the right opportunity to change the mindset and to change policies towards more local manufacturing, more regional integration, even before getting to the continental integration within Africa.
Well, thank you, Fabrice. So you're clearly talking about strengthening the regional cooperation before going to the continental one. Maybe I ask you, Anna, if you have any comments. And since we are talking about what countries should do to advance this cooperation, what are the most, in your opinion, the most effective incentives for international companies to import from African markets? We are talking about helping to get more exports from Africa to the rest of the world. What kind of incentives can we offer to these international companies to make them stop fearing about coming to Africa?
Well, so just to add on to what to the question that you asked previously about how, and also Fabrice's point about the cooperation, I think it's also not just an opportunity with COVID-19 for African economies. It is actually a necessity, right? There's a real need. A lot of the media at the moment, there's a huge discussion about, is there an African debt crisis? Our analysis suggests there's not an African debt crisis. There are a few countries who have challenges with debt right now. It's possible that there could be more debt challenges going forward, but we can overcome these issues, especially with GDP growth. And so that need to reignite sectors of the economy to create more jobs. Even before COVID-19, in order for African economies for Africa as a continent to hit the poverty reduction targets for the Sustainable Development Goals, the 20 million people every year needed to be lifted out of poverty, or lift themselves out of poverty. Now, how can that happen? There's so much necessity for the coordination, the cooperation, and working together in order to deliver that. We cannot just wait, and COVID-19 makes it much more necessary and much more important. You asked about what can be done. So, what are the actual incentives? There is a very clear business case for investing in Africa in general. If you don't focus too much on country risk and political risk, as they're typically called, very clear business case. Large young population, lots of people able to work, especially in terms of light manufacturing, and then obviously in terms of power, energy, rates of return on investment, all can be very high until you take into this until you take into this factor country risk or political risk. So this is the key issue to overcome. And what obviously there are, there's business people who look at the continent in a much more opportunistic way than others. If European Union policy can be devised to somehow subsidize, while at the same time trying to shift this outlook of what people perceive to be country risk and political risk, then that's obviously something that could help a lot. But there is this. It's often not very clear what people mean by country and political risk. Yet, for example, we see that the African countries have dealt with COVID-19 much better than Europe, many other parts of the world. So there's something that needs to be questioned there, as well as obviously offering subsidies. China offers great subsidies to its firms to go out. It does things like it will provide extra subsidies for actual subsidies for example, will pay the Chinese government will pay for feasibility studies. It will pay for the initial upfront cost of seed costs, effectively of an investment. It will even subsidize Chinese workers. Certain provinces subsidize Chinese workers to go out for policies, for projects. So the Chinese government really does invest in a lot of that. Whether the European Union could come up with something similar, that's also definitely possible.
So may I add, I think the COVID-19 has provided previously missing urgency amongst the leaders, African leaders, developing the sort of coherent industrial policy to necessary to get any benefit from this free trade zone. Now that they are trying to provide the necessary tools for business people for industrialization. Recently, last week, we organized online edition of Turkey Africa Economic and Business Forum, and we discussed platform in African countries and Turkey. And I think that African Union is adapting this current situation and trying to provide necessary tools. Of course, still it is a necessary infrastructure to implement this free trade area. And the European countries and Turkey can provide these tools as well. For instance, Turkish Airlines is flying to 60 destinations in Africa. They are also providing air cargo services. One example is they can get a green passport, so they can easily travel without the visa issue. So these kind of tools should be provided for African private sector as well. I think it's going to be. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Barish, for this. And I would also like to have your input about, from a Turkey point of view, what are the most effective incentives for Turkish companies to import from African markets? So we can talk about two types of incentives. Maybe the country itself, the government itself can offer incentives, but also African countries should think differently about how to attract value-adding investments to their lands. So from a Turkish Turkish companies' point of view, what are the most effective incentives we can offer, besides what Hannah just said about the opportunity that is already offered by the continents based on the working forces, based on the size of the markets?
The Turkish companies know that the market is risky, but they are high risk takers, and they know that they can, if they produce in Africa, they can reach out to other markets as well, like Europe and America. So that they know these opportunities, and they're asking countries to provide the necessary environment for them, with mutual agreements. And Turkey is the economic trade partnership with, I think, 33 countries in Africa to be able to provide this environment for Turkish businesses. The Turkish companies are the mostly family businesses, and they easily take decisions and fast enough practically, and they just they don't just need like a land to invest in. They need also to tools that help them to export to other countries as well. The banking system is important for them. For the money transfer, and of course the local workers important for them. They are willing to also provide vocational training, but they are looking for quality of the labor force. That's the second important thing for them. And other than that, they can easily adapt to the new the business environment, the business culture. So these are only two things that I think that the countries should offer them.
Yes, well, thank you for this, for your perspective, Baris. And I think that we haven't talked much. I mean, Hannah, Baris, and Fabrice, the political stability that some of the countries or the potential partners are pointing as one of the major threats that avoid Africa from getting more investments in general, and maybe more qualitative investments. Is it time for Africa to challenge this narrative about the political instability? If we wanted to answer that major point, because we usually get that as an answer when we ask about the kind of the lack of qualitative investors in Africa. You were talking about being risk averse, and there is a kind of paradox in the speech of some of the potential partners. I mean, you would like to come to a place which is Africa that offers employment, that offers workforces, that offers a large market, but it also can present a kind of risk, which is this political instability. How can we move forward with the narrative of the continent to position this as part of the package and not as maybe something that might push potential partners to give up investing in the continent? I would like to ask Fabrice if you have any inputs about this. How can we shift the narrative on that question, and then maybe Baris or Hannah, if you would like to add something to what Fabrice would say.
Khadija, unfortunately, nobody will help us Africans to try to change the narrative. And I think it goes beyond just singing, you know, Africa is safe, Africa is safe. You need to demonstrate, and there is no better demonstration than the facts. So if there is political instability, or if you show continued progress on reforms, and you keep doing it, then you're demonstrating that you are actually reforming, and that you are creating the right investment environment. So it's not enough just to say, well, we signed this agreement, we did X, we did Z, if it's not something that that is continued over many years. So we need to be consistent, and the consistency will demonstrate that we are serious in changing the narrative.
Yeah, so yeah, basically what you're saying is ACT has a bigger value than words, maybe. What do you think, Anna? Do you agree on this?
I do agree to some extent. I think African countries definitely need, and governments need to be a lot more confident, and to be clearly saying when they do push ahead, etc. I fully agree with that. At the same time, I also think that we also must challenge these different narratives, because effectively many of them are lose-lose for Africa. So this question, for example, around political instability, there's many countries that are not politically unstable. Take Rwanda. But at the same time, there'll be many people out there who'll say, oh, but hold on, Kagame has been in power for over 23 years. Shouldn't that be an indicator of political problem? Should it be an indicator of country risk, political risk in some shape or form? Yet, this is one of the fastest growing economies, not just in Africa, in the world now. So that these narratives of political instability, term limits, no term limits, what does democracy mean? Does it, is democracy actually helpful to ensuring, delivery of infrastructure or not? These ideas, many of them are not actually contested, and they often need to be contested in order for African countries to actually move ahead, because the evidence base for them is often not very clear. I'll give you another example: tax. On doing business indicators, which have now apparently been pulled back because of questions around how they were delivered, for how well the doing business indices for China and Saudi Arabia in particular came about. The doing business indices encourage governments to cut corporation tax and cut investment tax. At the same time, that is a real problem. Having low levels of tax delivery and low domestic resource mobilization is a real problem when it comes to how you deal with your debt burden and how you're able to pay for your recurrent expenditure. So how do African countries and governments actually square this circle? Because it is actually asking them to square a circle. These things are not consistent, and we need to call these issues out and say we actually need in a sense an African perspective on what growth, sustainable growth and sustainable investment and trade looks like with the rest of the world, and what we think are the positive indicators for that. Not ones which are quite inconsistent potentially with our ambitions and our plans.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. It has been more than 1 hour and 20 minutes that we are talking, and that we are giving actually a very different but very real diagnosis about how Africa and EU relations are being taken care of, if I can say, and how we can diversify, the continent can diversify partners and partnerships in order to help the countries of the continent go forward. We need to wrap up here and to conclude, and maybe I will ask you one question to conclude our panel. So getting back to Africa-EU partnership and believing that the EU as the historical partner of Africa, where the interests are still there and still growing, either for investments or for trade, but also considering that a strong partnership between Africa and the EU will help set strong partnerships between Africa and the rest of the world, because we will create significant environments, positive environments for partnership within the continent. What would be that one recommendation that each of you can formulate that would help take the Africa-EU relationships, mainly on trade and investment, to the next level, to a more balanced partnership to a more adding value partnership to the African continent, where everybody feels that taking advantage of this collaboration. So Baris, what would be your one recommendation to take this partnership forward?
I think that the problems are there. We always talk about the same problems, but the countries which are willing to share their experiences in reforming and how they solve these issues they experienced before, those countries will gain more and will contribute to African continental integration more. Which means, for instance, how you solve your social housing issue, how you solve your the SMEs development, how you solve your organizational industrial zones. You should share your experiences in those and make your investments. That's necessary for mutual beneficial relation for both parts.
Well, thank you, Baris. Hannah?
To summarize this, it's almost too hard. Look, I think there is a real opportunity here. There's a necessity here as well. Focus on quality, and when I say quality, I mean in terms of focus on investing in added value goods, making added value goods, and sending those to Europe, and as well as the quality of those actual investments, for example, into green investment and so on. I think Europe has a proposition, just hasn't actually set it out yet. And it has a proposition as a top partner for Africa, but I think we've got some way to go before that is properly articulated.
Thank you, Anna. Fabrice, what would be your one recommendation to take the Africa-EU partnership to the next level in a more balanced way?
My recommendation would be for both parties to focus more on investments than on trade flows.
Well, clear enough. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the. Yes, Baris?
No, I was just going to say build together, work together, produce together, and sell together.
Yeah, definitely. That's a nice word to close our panel on. So thank you very much for your valuable inputs. If I have to, let's say, reshare your three recommendations. So Baris was talking about more experience sharing, countries that can share their best practices with the African countries in order to assist and support with the finding solutions to some challenges, local challenges. By fixing the local challenges, we can help develop the international and external investments. And now I was talking about focusing on more qualitative investment that brings added value, be it in terms of the industry, manufacturing, or even green investments. And Fabrice was talking about focusing more on investments, and that's true. That's not very far from what Henri was saying. We need to develop investment within the African countries to help them industrialize and produce more. In that case, exports will be just a result of the development of investments. And then, Baris, you were stressing the fact that maybe the way we see partnerships between Africa and Europe has to be seen as doing things together. So investing together, working together, collaborating, kind of a more equal partnership than aids, and that's totally what our panels are for. So thank you very much, dear panelists. Thank you for the participants who were there. Thank you for the organizers who created this opportunity, and I hope to be able to see you sometime soon to continue the discussions about how to take the African continent to a better future. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your excellent moderation.